And what is going on, everybody out there in Badger Nation? It's your boy, Mike. And as always, I'm joined by Steven. Steven, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Mike. I hope everyone out there is doing pretty well, too. We're getting a lot of rain right now in Austin, so that's fun.
Yes. You know what else is fun? That new podcast intro. Very exciting, brand new, spicing it up. We like to have fun on the podcast, and hopefully our listeners out there can share in some of the fun.
Yeah, we just recorded it before recording this current podcast. We haven't edited it. We haven't even heard our own voices yet, so
yes.
We have no idea ourselves what it sounds like.
I think the accents are going to be either a hit or just our listens are just going to fall off a cliff.
Like that. We don't even know if that's any shorter than the original.
Next time we'll have a 10-minute podcast intro. 10 minutes. So as you know, we invite all of you listeners to leave us a voicemail at badger.com/voicemail. You can give us a call at 833-BADGERS. And we actually got a question from Adam. Adam says he's a huge fan of the show. Thank you so much, Adam. And this question is so poignant because it's a very, very popular topic. It is becoming more and more important. We are seeing the impact of these things go through the roof and are pretty impactful in people's accounts. Let's hear what we're going to be talking about today. Let's play a little of Adam's question.
Hi there, my name's Adam. I'm an e-commerce manager from the UK, big Ad Badger fan. On the topic of placements and trying to funnel more traffic to the first page top of search placement, just wanted to query whether this strategy would work. So we've noticed that most of our campaigns perform way better within this placement area. So the strategy that we thought we'd use to funnel more traffic there is to reduce all of our base bids to very low levels, like 11 cents to 20 cents. Then up the placement top of search bid adjustment to 400%. And based on average click cost per click, that would have meant that we had a competitive bid when you make that calculation. Set the product page bid adjustment to 0%.
Boom, Steven, this is our first one that we're doing on the show. Listener question. I think this is awesome. Thank you so much, Adam, for writing in. Steven, let's break down this question, shall we?
Yeah, and thanks again, Adam, for sending in that question. Actually, when I was first listening to that voicemail, I actually had a smile crack across my face because I completely understood like his frustrations, where he was coming from. Like I loved seeing how he was thinking through this. Like he's exactly spot on with his question. Dude,
when I'm in the office, like it'll be like 6:30, 7 o'clock at your big 27-inch monitor. You've got the spreadsheet open. You're like, dude, I'm banging out these placement bid settings.
Right. At nighttime, I don't get in that early.
This is real stuff. Yeah, that's right. This is 7 p.m. So yeah, so like this is incredibly like perfect for this timing. So break down this question, Steven.
Yeah, so it's basically twofold. I think Adam's got two questions going in there. The first one is, talking about like he very clearly sees a big difference between the conversion performance for top of search and rest of search or product pages. Mm-hmm. He's wondering, how much should I increase my bids for top of search?
Right.
And so he was saying, like 400%. So he's kind of wondering, he's kind of just guessing at a number. So we're going to talk about, how do you calculate the exact perfect increase amount? The second part of his question was, he was saying, because you can't decrease bids for rest of search, he's saying, do I have to manually just like do a global decrease of all my bids? He's talking about getting like 11 cent, 20 cent bids on all of his keywords, just really, really low. So like the default bid for rest of search would be really low. But then his top of search, once you do a 400% multiplier, whatever, maybe it's going to get you back up to like 80 cents to $1.
So this is so perfect. And we've touched on placement bid modifiers in the past, but what's going to be different about this episode is we're actually going to walk through, it's a relatively simple formula. We're actually going to walk through this formula so that you'll know exactly what to go into each campaign and actually set some placement bid modifiers. And if it's all right with you, Steven, I'd like to actually like walk through just a concept, maybe using devices instead of placements, just because it's a little bit easier to wrap our heads around.
Yeah, and I think we did kind of we did talk about this, and I think the analogy you're about to present, we did hit this on an episode about placement settings,
right.
But I think it's really good to just give this like a 2.0, like an even deeper dive. Yeah, so go for it.
So let's say we have two devices. We have mobile bids and mobile conversion rates, and then desktop bids and desktop conversion rates. And let's say you look at a placement report and it says that your mobile bids are converting 200% better. So in a perfect world, you would just go right in and you'd set your mobile bid to 200%. But what would happen if you couldn't set a bid modifier for desktop, even though desktop had a different level of performance? Well, what you'd have to do is go in and actually figure out what your desktop bid should be without a modifier. So you'd actually have to go in and say, well, if my desktop is converting 50% less, you'd have to go in and decrease your desktop bid. And then you'd have to figure out how far am I from my mobile bid increase. So then you have to go in and increase it by that much at which you reduced your desktop. And I know that's a little confusing because it is. For some reason on Amazon, we have these three placements. We have top of search, which is the top of the search result page. We have the rest of search, which is anything that's not on top of search, in the middle of page 1, on the bottom of page 1, page 2, so on and so forth. And then we, of course, have product pages. Now, these are all going to behave sometimes dramatically different. Sometimes top of search might convert at 10, 15%, and sometimes rest of search might convert at 1 or 2%. So the difference in performance here is so dramatic that we have to go and look at this and sort of calculate our top of search bid and then basically figure out how much we need to increase that over rest of search. So that's sort of how we need to wrap our minds around this. Our new default bid becomes our rest of search bid, and then we figure out by how much do we need to increase it. So that's exactly what this episode is going to be about. How much should we be reducing our default bid? How much should we be making our top of search bid increase? That's exactly it. We have some really easy examples. So by the end of this, everyone should be leveled up on this.
Yeah, and just to kind of get things going, I wanted to start off with an actual real example that we were just talking about. Our team was slacking about this. We have a Slack channel called Amazon PPC Talk, and I was throwing some screen caps in there of an account that I was actually updating today and doing all these calculations that we're about to talk about. But basically what we were looking at is, you want to look at the conversion rate performance for each of those 3 ad placements. And then, you want to figure out which one's the best performing ad placement. It's usually top of search, but not always. And then you want to find out by how much better is that conversion rate? What's the conversion performance difference? And so if you find out that it performs like 100% better, then you're going to want to increase those bids by 100%. So we'll talk about all those calculations in just a second, but just to give you an example of this one account, this one campaign, the conversion rate for top of search was 13.5%. So pretty solid conversion rate. Conversion rate for rest of search was 3%. So pretty big drastic drop off. And then for product pages, it was less than 2%. It was 1.4%.
Right.
So,
and we've touched on this topic before. Just generally higher up in the search, people are more eager to go and attack. These people are sort of hunters. They see it, they click on it, they buy it. Whereas maybe rest of search, product pages, these people are just browsing. So they would, be more inclined to just continue to click around. And what's really crazy is that we have that conversion rate breakdown. Top of search, for this particular example, 13.5%. Rest of search, 3%. Product pages, 1.5%. And what's really crazy about this, so you have that level of performance, and just to describe how impactful these placement changes are, to really understand that, not only do you need the conversion rates of these things to really figure out, wow, if I got more clicks for top of search, how much better would that be? If I can get more clicks at a 14% conversion rate, that's awesome. What's really crazy is the spend distribution. Steven, talk a little bit about how top of search, rest of search, product pages was actually distributed in this particular example.
Yeah, and this example is a great one, but I see it all the time where, usually, and it's kind of weird, but the majority of the ad spend is going to the placement with the worst conversion rates. And in this specific example, top of search had $30 of ad spend. Rest of search, which had the 3% conversion rate, had $100 of ad spend. And product pages, which had less than 2% conversion rate, had $200 of ad spend. So essentially, what's the total of that? 200 divided by we'll say 330, round off. So 60% of the ad spend budget is being spent on product pages where it has the lowest conversion rate. So the idea is, you know, flip that, right? Let's spend the majority of our money winning top of search placements where it's the best.
And let's not bid the same on top of search with a 14% conversion rate that we do at rest of search and product pages, which have under 3%.
Right.
So not only do we want to fix our distribution of clicks, but we also want to pay less for things that convert at a lower rate.
Yeah, and the CPCs on these, I mean, the CPCs were actually the highest on product pages.
Explain that.
Yeah, and so the idea that we're going after here is, you'll see in a second, we're going to be decreasing our bids, you know, for all of our keywords,
right?
But then really cranking the increased percentage for
top
search.
You know what I feel like a lot of people do at this stage? They would see this and be like, oh, product pages converting only at 1.39%. You know, my CPC is 95 cents. I'm just going to go find a way to turn it off. You know, maybe I won't even run sort of auto campaigns anymore, and, you know, try to like reduce the amount of product pages, but it's not like it's converting at zero. You are getting sales from this. You're just paying too much for it.
Right.
You know, the ACoS is too high. So again, one of the best ways to scale an account is just to figure out what you should be bidding for everything that you get a conversion for. So I feel like there's this big push for people to turn off something that converts but doesn't convert well, when in actuality, we would just want to decrease our bid for these placements. So then you'll still get clicks that convert, but you'll just be paying less for them. So they'll convert at your target, whatever you need.
Well, let's dive into it and talk about how to make these calculations.
So for this example, we are going to have a very simple, and, you know, I would recommend maybe taking out a piece of paper, writing these down. If you're on your computer at home, popping open Excel, Google Sheets, or if you're, you know, in the car, maybe pause this, come back to it, because we're going to be breaking it down. It's going to be really, really easy. Once you actually discover this formula, this math behind it, it's actually really easy and straightforward to figure out what you should go in and enter your top of search modifier, what you should be reducing your default bids by. It's actually really elegant. And I definitely have to say, I have to commend Stephen for actually diving through loads of spreadsheets to really figure out what this calculation should be. So we tested it, we looked at it, the performance has been pretty darn good with it, and this is a pretty quick way to implement placement changes in your account right here, right now. So let's take a simple example. Let's take top of search, rest of search, product pages. So if you're following along, write these things down. Top of search, rest of search, product pages. Let's give top of search a 10% conversion rate. Let's give rest of search a 5% conversion rate, and let's give product pages a 7% conversion rate. So all we've got right now, top of search, 10, rest of search, 5, product pages, 7. Now, Stephen, what is this formula that we should write down underneath?
Yeah, so and real quick, just kind of before we dive into all of that, just so you guys know where to get your conversion rate, Amazon doesn't give it to you. Your conversion rate is how many orders you got, not units sold, but your actual number of orders divided by your total number of clicks. That's going to tell you how many shoppers actually ended up, you know, converting or making a sale for you. So yeah, you'll take those 3 ad placements, that top of search, and say you got, you know, 1 conversion and 10 clicks. Now you've got a 10% conversion rate.
Yeah.
So once you figure out the conversion rate for each of your ads placements, like Michael said, was 10, 5, and 7, you're going to take your best conversion rate and you're going to divide that by your worst conversion rate, and then you're going to subtract 1 from that. So that is the equation to figure out basically how much better is the best converting ad placement performing than the worst.
Yes, and in this example, we made the best performing placement top of search because most likely your top of search will convert the best. So you take the best converting rate, and in this example, it's 10 over the worst, which in this example is 5. So it would be 10 over 5, which is 2. And then you take 2 and you minus 1, which is 1. And now you have 100%. So basically, this makes sense, right? Because 10 is 100% greater than 5. So my 10% conversion rate is 100% better than my 5% conversion rate. So I've landed on what my top of search modifier should be. This converts twice as good as my worst one. So that's how I have 100%. So hopefully everyone's with us there. We have just figured out how much we should increase our best converting placement here. Again, and best converting over worst converting, -1, boom.
And then for product pages, you would have, so if we were saying, assuming a 7% conversion rate for product pages, 5% on top of search, or for rest of search, you get 7 divided by 5, and then you would subtract 1 from that number. So that would end up giving you, 7 divided by 5 is 1.4, and then you subtract 1 and you get 0.4. So basically it's 40% better conversion rate on product pages than rest of search.
Boom. So now we know what number to put in our top of search modifier as well as our product page modifier.
And those are calculated. We're not guessing, because sometimes people will say, well, I'll throw a 400% multiplier on top of search, and then it goes crazy. It was too much.
Right. Now the question becomes, well, wait a second. What am I supposed to do with rest of search? How do I modify my bids for rest of search? Well, we need to figure out what our decrease is for rest of search. Stephen, walk us through that. How do we calculate a decrease?
Yeah, and just to make sure we're all aware of why we need to decrease our bids is if you just increase, your bid, whatever, adjustments for top of search and product pages, but you don't change your rest of search, the majority of your ad spend budget may still go to the wrong spot at extremely high ACoS, extremely low conversion rate. You may be getting more traffic now at top of search and wherever you're increasing, but the goal is to also get less traffic, or at least the right amount of traffic at those worst spots. So the way we would do this now, and forgive me if it's kind of complicated, or at least mentally I think to wrap your mind around it, we are going to have a blog post on this as well with we'll have, all the equations will be there. So if you don't have to memorize it, it'll be there. You can grab it. We got one of our interns, or formerly an intern, now he's contracting for Shazib. Shout out to Shazib. He's making these into really nice graphics.
Great UT student.
Yep.
UT banging out some great potential graduates.
Shout out
Good
to
stuff.
UT. So he'll make a graphic for this. But the decrease equation is going to be 1 divided by, then parentheses, 1 plus whatever the percent increase was. So to give that into an actual hard example, when we were just talking about how much better top of search was from rest of search, we realized it was 100% better. So we're going to increase bids for top of search by 100%. Now that 100%, we're now going to plug that into our equation. So it'll be 1 divided by, and then the bottom part of this division is all in parentheses, 1 plus 100%, or 1 plus 1, which is going to give you 2. And so you're going to have 2 on the bottom, 1 on top. Your answer is 0.5. So we are going to multiply all of our bids by 0.5, or essentially cut them all in half, to basically make the default bid for rest of search half of what it was. But then when we increase bids by 100% again for top of search, the bids will go back to where they were.
Right.
And that's following all of we're talking about when you're doing your revenue per click times target ACoS. We did bidding strategy episodes, so that's what we're talking about there.
Right. And that's it. This will probably take people, probably the first time you go through, maybe 20, 30 minutes per campaign. But I feel like this is really empowering because we finally know, mathematically, what should we be going in there and doing for our top of search, our product page bid modifiers. And then if we are increasing these bids, how do we change our default bids for all of our keywords? So we will have a really detailed walkthrough with pictures of these equations on our blog. And we're actually inspired by prepping for this episode, actually having a bid calculator on our site where you can just go in and punch in your numbers, and then it'll actually just spit out what you should punch in. So you can actually skip some of these calculations. So I don't know if that's going to be up when we publish this podcast, but depending on when you listen to this, it's probably going to be up. So be sure to go over to adbadger.com/podcast and actually click on the podcast notes and read our long form detailed post for this episode. So boom, Stephen, is this the end of placement bid modifiers?
You know what? There's one other catch that we might as well say it now because someone's going to bring it up. We're going to get this question next. And the question is this: what if the keywords perform differently? What if each keyword performs differently in each ad placement?
And that takes us to the next segment. So yes, Stephen, you're right. Different keywords within the same campaign, you only get to set your placement modifiers at the campaign level.
Right.
So you're basically taking the aggregate of all your keyword performance and then sort of taking the average performance for top of search, rest of search product pages for all the keywords in there, whether it be keywords or product targets, category targets, even your auto targets.
Right. For example, once you add, say, like a 200% increase for top of search, you may have like really bad performing keywords that never got that sort of bid update. So they never got those top of search placements, but now suddenly they're there and they're not performing as well as your other keywords that you were ranking really well for.
Right. So even before we get into a potential solution to this, we do want to say that the first part of this episode, breaking down those placement settings, that's definitely good. Like, you should do that. It's better than not doing it at all. So I think that's a good point to make. This other part that we're talking about is a little bit more experimental. Basically, we're saying, and we haven't done loads and loads of testing on this yet. We started to recently. And basically what we are proposing is, because different keywords, so let's say keyword A, let's say its top of search performance is 15%. And let's say its product pages is 5% conversion rate. Let's say we have a keyword B, just for the sake of example. Let's say its top of search converts at 45%. And let's say its product pages converts at 1%. So like, let's say two keywords, but just drastically different performance. The only way to have different placement bid modifiers for these two keywords is to actually break them out into separate campaigns.
Right. So you would essentially be rolling out a single keyword campaign strategy, which has no real benefits of itself, except for taking advantage of campaign level adjustments,
right?
Such as those bid adjustments,
right?
For each keyword.
Right. And this is not new. I mean, we talked about single keyword campaigns for sponsored brand ads. So when people are searching a keyword, they see that keyword in the ad text for your sort of headline search ad or your sponsored brand ad up top. So this all kind of makes sense, where there's, just as a general rule of thumb in paid traffic, you want to be as segmented as you can. Here's the caveat: without it getting in the way of actual optimization. So the question then becomes, how much work is it to actually do this? Stephen, so you started doing this in this past week. Walk us through what you actually did.
Yeah, so by a special request by one of our clients, they wanted to test out this strategy. We had no idea how it's going to work, so we're just doing it with, I think we just have 20 keywords right now that we just put into separate campaigns. So we've got.
How did you decide on the 20?
I took 20 keywords with at least $10 of ad spend from the third most important campaign. Okay.
So like mid-importance.
Mid-importance.
Some
to
data.
Still get some data on it, but not enough to rock the boat if it goes poorly.
Cool.
Yeah, it was just a lot of Excel work because I don't like using Campaign Manager. I prefer to do everything in bulk operation files.
Right.
So just created a bulk file that created 20 new campaigns, an ad group in each campaign, all having one keyword in each ad group, and started off with 100% top of search increase just to get things rolling.
Yeah. I was just at lunch with a high-powered Amazon seller earlier this week, and they're also testing this single keyword campaign strategy. And I think he said that he was paying somebody like $5,000 a month to roll this out. And I was just thinking, because we're not charging $5,000 to do this.
Maybe we should.
Maybe we should, right? So I guess the point is, does this have some promise? It's sort of starting to percolate up, where it's like you're looking at it and you're like, oh man, like why can't I do placement settings per keyword? This is really the only way to do that. And it's kind of like this. I feel like over the last 10 years of doing paid traffic, there's always been stuff like this, where it's like the optimization principle outpaced what the platform has available. So then people have to start doing these wonky things where it's like, oh, well, now I guess I have to do this. You know, at one point in time on Google Ads, you couldn't set like negative tablet settings, or I forget exactly what it was. So you would essentially do the same thing. You'd create a tablet only campaign and a mobile only campaign instead of having your modifiers within each one. So it was like, there's always been like these sort of frustrating things that have popped up where the optimization principle is there. It's apparent, but the platform just doesn't catch up. In a perfect world, will we ever have placement settings by ad group? Maybe.
I would like to.
Right? Placement settings by ad group. Placement settings by keyword. I mean, I don't know. That seems a little... I don't think they would do that because that seems like so granular. That seems like so... Because they're only doing it at the campaign level. And if we don't get ad group level, we're not going to get individual keyword level. So it's something really interesting to think about.
The only other thing that you would have to watch out for is if you're doing single keyword campaigns, Amazon caps you at 10,000 campaigns being active or paused at any time. So
I heard if you message them, they will kick it up.
What?
Yes, I heard if you message them, they'll kick it up.
Sweet.
So try to be friendly to Amazon overlords. I think that's it. So we're going to keep sort of posting about this. We'll probably have a full episode once we know more about the single keyword campaign strategy. We'll probably also have some training on our site about how to quickly set this up inside bulk files. You know, I honestly think, Steven, you are probably like top 1% bulk file manager in the world for Amazon advertising.
It's high praise.
Right? I feel like we know a lot of Amazon advertisers, and to see you download this bulk file, make all these changes, blast them back up. The badger is strong inside of you.
To warn you guys, if you use bulk files, there's been like a recurring bug with some of the bulk files where it's not always updating the changes. So just double check a few of things first, because I've contacted them and they fixed it, but then it came back. So
I wonder if we can build like a bulk file intermediary inside AdBadger where like you put it to AdBadger first, and then like it sends it to Amazon. It's like, okay, we're crunching it, we're sending it, and then you can actually see every single change.
Verify.
And if anything like wasn't live in the account, you'd get like some kind of feedback, because the feedback right now when you upload a bulk file straight into Amazon isn't terrific.
Right, because it says successfully processed, but then
it wasn't. Got to write that down in our backlog. Get that going. Item number 5,000.
Awesome. Well, that's the show, you guys. Thank you so much for listening and for supporting us. And stay tuned for our next episode coming out next week.
See you guys later.